Trunk chops are absolutely simple. They're easy. It's what comes next that's the real challenge. And to find out about that, you definitely need to keep on watching, because I think a few of you may well think twice before you use those. I've literally just sit up and the rain is starting to fall. Give up. Hiya, it's Xavier and welcome to my bonsai retreat, and welcome to what I think is going to be a really important and interesting video. Look at this. This was a Japanese maple, the Osakazuki, which you watched me do a hard prune, both the top and indeed the roots. I took off 80% of the roots, and that was just three and a half months ago, and I said to you it was going to come back alive and buzzing and looking fantastic. And you say that is why we do trunk chops, and you're quite right. And indeed I got exactly the same fantastic results with the 3 or 4 Yamadori Hazel that I dug up last November from Azalea nursery. And look at it, it has got so much growth, it's got so much shoots, but honestly it has 2 really big problems that it shares with the maple. In fact, it's the same 2 problems that all of you are going to face, and I reckon a lot of you, especially beginners, will underestimate and sometimes let defeat you. So let's go through the real problem with doing these big trunk or branch chops, and perhaps come up with 1 or 2 viable solutions, whether you have a big garden or indeed a small garden, because it's worth it. You just need to understand what you're facing for the next 5-6 years afterwards. Do you know what? I had to interrupt because right now, as you can see, my Satsuki azaleas are in full bloom. Absolutely incredible. It's the first time they've bloomed like this. And indeed, this one here, which is my $50 bonsai challenge back from 2022, made with azalea cuttings. And it's the first time this has bloomed as well. I'm over the moon. You're not going to see the azaleas this year, and there's a good reason for that, and it's all to do with the fact that we've got an 18-month time lapse where I go through the full recovery process of taking sick, ailing, unhealthy, unflowering Satsuki azaleas and turning them into this with nice, bright green, vibrant leaves, lovely full head of healthy flowers. Wish I had a full head of healthy hair. Enough of that. So, isn't it fantastic? I had to interrupt to show you this, but now let's go back to the main feature, because those trunk chops really do present a problem, don't they? For the sake of this filming, no live plants actually got hurt. This fun chop was my 25-year-old larch, which died last year. Make a good bonfire though, but more of that in October. So first of all, you know what? Tap yourself on the back if you've got these sort of results. I know Jason Hanrahan of the Bonsai Garden has had similar results with the nursery maple that he hacked up a few months back. In fact, Jason, I actually think, well, I think I've got a bit better foliage than you, but it's not about how big it is it? And you know what? We should all be rightfully happy because, you know, occasionally, just occasionally, the trunk chops don't work. That is something you have to be prepared for. I've probably lost, out of 10 trunk chops, I've probably lost 2 trees, and normally I found it's the hornbeam or the hawthorn that I lose. But hey, we've done the trunk chop or the branch chop, and we've got all these lovely shoots. We've got lots of new growth coming from junctions and 2s and 3s and, you know, all the normal stuff. And we are going to deal with that. And in fact, we've had such vigorous growth already that, well, if you remember, I put some wire on this. And unfortunately, my usual failing, if you look in close, well, the wire has become a part of the branch. That's not good. And the first issue really that we all need to be concerned about when we do these trunk chops and when we consider it is the taper. And I know a lot of you say, oh, don't worry about taper. In nature, trees don't have taper. Well, do you know what? I had a look around after that comment someone made, and I found very few trees that when you looked over the full scale of them didn't show a slow taper to the top. Yes, you could have little sections that weren't, but basically trees will taper from the trunk to the outer branches. If we want it to look proportionally correct, pleasing to our eye, and generally true to nature. So taper does exist for me. Now, we've got the trunk that comes up here, and you know this tree was 3 foot tall, and what I did is I cut all these big branches back to here, and I've got this big chop here, which is on the side branch. I've got loads of shoots coming from it, but overall, when you look at the changing in dimensions and the slowly tapering up, not so much here, but there is slowly a reasonable change in proportion and size that is relatively workable and relatively realistic. This is a pretty good example of doing branch chops in decent places with reasonable material. And many of you might say, yeah, but I'd probably have cut that one off, and I might have cut that one off. But I tell you what, let's talk about that right now. Because right here we have a Japanese maple. That's exactly what I did. I actually had a much taller and less tapered trunk, and I said, I'm not happy, and I've cut it right back here. Now, if you look at the problem I'm going to talk about branch thickness in relation to what's nearest to it, this branch here is micro thin. Compare it to the trunk that it's coming out from, or it could be the branch it's coming out from. And if you have that sort of differentiation, it's never ever going to look right. We know that that branch has to grow to at least, well, I would suggest at least a pencil thickness before it even starts to approximate what you could expect on a real tree. And that is our number one problem that we face when we do these, certainly the branch cuts, where we've actually got to wait for those to grow thick enough for it to make sense and for the chop to make sense in the first place. And how are we going to do that? Well, we'll come back to that in a minute, because I want to talk about the second big problem, which is actually, well, it's staring me right in the face. And yeah, the second big issue, and probably the hardest one to deal with, is actually the wounds that are left behind after you've done these big cuts, because the tree has to invest all that energy into trying to, one, heal them over, and then two, producing branches that will ultimately hide or take over, because there's no way around it. That scar is massive. To heal it, you want branches all around it so that it can slowly heal over, and we've seen the healing process where we're trying to get the cambium and the sin to roll over until it's cuts like these that can really mar the finished look of any of your really nice bonsais. There's two solutions to that, and we're going to go through that in a second. Right, so we've established the two biggest underestimated issues that we face once we've done those trunk chops, once we've got those successful results and we're buoyant about it, is that we've got massive wounds and we've potentially got branches which have got a big differential in relative sizes to each other. And the solution? Well, it depends. I said I was going to give you two options. One option was going to be if you've got my environment, a bit of space, growing beds, good hint, and indeed you're more than happy to let the years roll by and do it slowly, clip and grow. We're going to talk about that method, but the second method, and the one that probably Jason Hanrahan is the most fan of, is where you haven't got the big space, you haven't got the growing beds or the nursery beds, and you still want to produce a credible bonsai which perhaps doesn't deal with the actual scars, but finds a way to mellow it out, to hide it. By the way, don't you just love it? This is the second of the Hazel stumps, and you know, I picked it and I did the cut so that I knew I'd be able to produce that relative believable taper over a shorter period of time. But this is going to be fantastic, and this is very possible. It really is possible, certainly in the UK, and certainly with many of our common varieties, our field maples, our hawthorns, flow of wind, our hazels, our maples. There's loads of stock. I'd argue that probably at 90 to 95% of all your deciduous stock that you've got native to your country will survive a hard trunk or branch cut without much difficulty, so long it's healthy. And you saw with the maple, that one, and in fact these as well, I took away 80% of the roots at the same time that I took all the tops off. And look. So for those of you asking that question in late winter, Yamadori stock, should I do just the roots or just the top? My answer's simple. Do it both. Get the tree shocked in one go. Use all that stored energy in one go and do everything. Then put it in a planter or put it in a nursery bed, and then I would suggest your odds are 9 out of every 10 will be a success. So here we go. 2 years ago, I trunk chopped this massive great oak and put it in this pot, larger pot. I've got 2 branches here which are growing out. At the moment, that and that are nowhere near big enough to make it look realistic as part of a tree. And actually, I'm doing this as a time-lapse experiment because for those of you who don't have great big areas or gardens to utilize my second solution, then this is what you're faced with. You've done your trunk chop. You've got your 2 branches. They are pretty small, and right now it's raining. And that is never going to be a bonsai in a million years. Well, actually, it could be. We need to feed heavily. We need to make sure that these are left alone. They need to grow and grow and grow. As they do that, they thicken. So the answer when you've got this in a pot, even if it's a small pot, is let branches grow. Even if it's a small pot. Look at this. There's no growing room in that. But with this relative, all I've done is I've let this shoot continue to grow. And what I'll do is I let it grow until I think it is just about a millimetre or 2 smaller than the trunk, which was originally a full trunk chop. That is also serving another purpose because we've got the big wound there that is slowly rolling over and is being healed by all the sap flow through here. And there's enough there to get that rollover happening. All I want now is a smaller distance than that. So I am going to cut there. And that's all gone. I just need to put some cut paste on there. So it definitely is possible in a small pot to do the required growth to get a good slow taper. You just need to let the branch grow long and long and long. In a pot, it could take longer. May not do it in the first year. You may have to wait the second year. If that happens, cut side branches so that all the growth is going into the leader. And also, it will deal with the second point, which is actually healing those big trunk chops. And the amount of sap flow we had going through there means the last trunk chop, small trunk, is healing nicely as well. So although I'm going to go for my favorite solution, if you haven't got a lot of space, you can still do it in the pots. You just need the tree to be healthy and you need to fertilize it and feed it and let branches grow. Now this is a slightly bigger example. It's an oak. Oh, by the way, the last one was just an apple that was grown from an apple pit, probably 9 years ago. So this again, about another oak, and half the size of that great big monster you saw a moment ago. And this has been slowly developing over like 4 years in this pot. It takes a long time, and I think that's probably what I'll say right now. Expectation. If you've got this this great big trunk on an apple tree maybe or something like that, and you want to have this big massive trunk and a tree this big, your biggest problem is, yeah, you can cut the trunk, and you cut the trunk at say 6 inches, 7 inches, and then you really severely underestimate just how long it's going to take you, 1, to heal that wound, and 2, to grow a thick enough branch that can take over, i.e. as a new leader trunk, or indeed as new branches like this. It took 4 years after I did the cut there, which is probably 1/2 inch in thickness. In fact, I've got to do a little bit of work cleaning that up. But it is possible in a pot, but only up to a certain point. Much bigger than that, like the one we just saw, and I'd suggest that it's not actually viable or possible while it's in a controlled container like that. staying in the environment of pots, i.e. you've got a small garden or limited resources, you've got your big nursery, it was a 3-foot tree, and you've been bold, you've taken the decision, you've cut it down to like 4 inches in this case. And again, the reason why 4 inches is because proportionately, I'm thinking I only need to grow a branch or two that's half that size. That's realistic in a pot this size, probably 3 to 4 years. And eventually, you'll get something like that. Now was what you call a pom-pom olive. Go back to 2022 in my olive series, there's a playlist all about it. In fact, I'll put it in the description if you're interested in olives, because I know someone, I can't remember who, was asking, actually, how was that olive getting on? Here it was, it's like a circumference of probably 3-4 centimeters, cut here, flat cut, and then what you're looking at is you're relying on number of shoots coming from the top, and you'll often see this done with broom style Chinese elms. They chop the top and they just wait for a load of growth coming up. And again, with that sort of size in a reusable grow container or pot, you allow 4, maybe 5 of the strongest shoots to develop. These were allowed to flush out to 2-3 feet and left alone for a year. Then last year I cut them right back down, and slowly now I'm going to build out what is going to be a sort of broom olive. But don't ever underestimate just how long it takes, one, to heal, and how long it takes to get proportionally sized branches along your trunk. Now, my answer, of course, is growing beds. And you all knew I was going to say that. Now, granted, using the growing bed, the principle's exactly the same. All you're doing is finding facility to let multiple branches grow around a wound site until they're sufficiently big that they pull enough sap flow through to help aid the healing process. And then whether it's in a growing bed or indeed in a pot, we then reopen the cambium so that it gives the tree the opportunity to roll over just a little bit more than it did the year before. Now granted, in a nursery bed, there's no doubt it happens probably twice as fast because there's all that energy available to the tree from being in the ground. So I continue to open up the cambium on this one here. And equally, when it comes to trying to get branches that are proportionate build, you put it into a growing bed, and you can see with the beech, with the English elms there, those trunks in the space of just 2 years are already at the stage where probably next year I can dig them and bring them out and put them into a smaller controlled environment, a bonsai pot. And to see that, obviously, you need to be subscribed. That'll be happening next February, and I'm sure it's going to be worth seeing because there's some cracking results going on in there right now. Now, I did say that there's another sort of approach, and again, if you haven't got growing beds, or indeed if you've got things like this big privet stump or hawthorn stumps, then you'll often find that what we do, and we do it also with big trident maple stumps, is because it's nearly impossible to grow thick enough branches in the time period we've got, we actually use wire or lots of shoots to layer over and cover and hide. Often the stump, we do a lot of carving on the stump so that it actually breaks it up. And it can look really legitimate, it's a really good technique, but you're literally layering over and trying to hide what is sometimes a terrible, ugly stump. I'm doing it with my hawthorn stump. I will be carving these big cut sites to basically hide or make it look like they've been eroded through nature. The trunk has actually come down, so it can look pretty natural. This is the other option you've really got if you're not able to grow out those wounds. Get yourself some carving tools or some woodworking tools, as you've seen me just do, and just slowly make those trunk sites, those great flat cuts, very, very interesting. And the pigeons are busy mating right now, so can't be that interesting a topic. So in the end, you develop branch structure around your trunks. You then carve them and make them, stain them and look interesting. Like here, this one, taken all the way down. And you slowly make the actual big, thick, horrible stump a thing of interest. And then you spread and grow branches around it. So I think really the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is nothing wrong with doing trunk chops, nothing wrong with using growing beds or indeed trying to do it in pots. But expectation, be aware of just how long it takes, and that sometimes you may put something that's really thick into a small pot and then be disappointed because it never, ever, ever has enough energy to create thick enough branches to do any of your wound healing, or indeed to make any of your branch structure anywhere near what's required to make the tree look realistic. And for those of you who are busting a bit to find out what I'm going to do to this nursery purchased Japanese maple, well, hey, surprise, surprise, it is going to be part of a time lapse. I've got lots of trunk chop videos, and do you know what? All I'll be doing right now, just for those of you who want to know, removing little unwanted shoots, concentrating on just the big shoots that I need. I need healing up here, so I want this one to continue to grow. I need to do work on the wound sites. Again, it's probably something that a lot of us forget, and I'll remind you, when we do these chops, every year go back. No matter how many trees you've got, go back, have a look at the wound. Keep on working on it, because the more you work on it, the quicker it's going to roll over and heal. Anyway, I've got a thunderstorm coming in over my right shoulder. So if you want to see something interesting while I'm hiding from the rain, that's a great video. Otherwise, happy bonsaiing. God bless. Cheers.